Cry wolf. Sometimes it seems I can scarcely turn around nowadays without being entertained. I am surrounded by TV sets, radios, video cassette recorders, video games, stereos, and assorted other electronic home entertainment. Then there are movies, plays, concerts, and the symphony. True, I only attend the symphony when my wife can rent the straitjacket that looks like a tuxedo, which, too, is considered by many people an entertainment. Spectator sports exist in such copious variety and number that I can scarcely find time for matters of more consequence, such as my hunting and fishing. In short, I live in a veritable sea of entertainment. But it was not always so. During the years I was 6 and 7, my mother taught all 8 grades in a little log schoolhouse tucked back into a remote valley of the Rocky Mountains. There was no electricity, no running water. Our stove had been constructed out of an old steel barrel by a local madman. Countless fires had burned little holes through the metal of the stove. Sparks popped through these holes to provide our only home entertainment, which consisted of stomping out the fires they started. The closest newspaper route ended 40 miles away. Our mailbox was 60 miles away, which was all right, because we didn't have any magazine subscriptions or anyone to write to us. We didn't have a radio. Our only source of news was the Ouija board, and it wasn't reliable, always trumping up phony illnesses in healthy but distant members of the family, or giving accounts of those who had passed on. The departed generally seemed to be having a better time than we were. I did what I could to create my own entertainment. Once, I affixed a pry pole to the girl's privy and hid in the brush until my victim entered, a foxy 8-year-old by the name of Opal. Then I leaped out and pushed up and down on the pole, causing the privy to rock precariously to and fro. This was one of my earliest experiments in physics, and I believe quite a successful one. The rocking produced immensely satisfying screeches from inside the privy, thus proving my hypothesis as to that effect. Little did I realize that this innocent prank would typify my future relationships with women, all of whom would regard me with suspicion, even when I wasn't carrying a pry pole. Winter bored me the most, with the roads to town blocked for months by snowdrifts and the privies frozen solidly to the ground. Aside from stomping out stove spark fires, our family's only other entertainment during the winter occurred on Tuesday evenings. Although we had no radio, our nearest neighbors did. Their cabin could be reached only by hiking 3/4 of a mile on a narrow trail cut through thick, second-growth forest. The trail began with a long, winding, decaying bridge, once used by a logging operation to cross several meanders of a creek and a swampy area. The bridge consisted largely of gaping holes, suspended high in the air and roughly defined by rotting timbers. A cautious person would think twice before crossing it in daytime and summer. Only desperate fools would consider the possibility of crossing the icy structure in the dark of a winter night. "Watch where you step," my mother said one wintry Tuesday night. "This log is really slick." She carried a torch made of a length of broomstick and a cloth dipped in kerosene. Huge shadows of ourselves leaped and played among the trees as the troll and I, in single file, followed Mom inch by inch along the log. "Hurry," the troll said. "We don't want to be late." "There's plenty of time," my mother said. "Careful! Lord save us, I nearly slipped off the bridge. Here, Trudy, grab my hand and pull me back up so I can hook my other leg over the log." "Oh, thank you, dear. Phew." "Come on, Ma," I said. "Stop fooling around. Now you've gone and dropped the torch in the crick. We're going to be late for sure." "Would you stop your eternal whining? Reach back and whack him one, would you, Trudy, dear? Thank you. All right, now just another 400 feet and we'll be off the bridge. Exactly what was this entertainment for which we risked crossing the bridge? Why, nothing less than the Henry Aldrich radio program, a joyous half-hour of unrelieved laughter and entertainment. I remember that the show opened with the teenager's mother calling out, "Henry! Henry Aldrich!" Even now, the recollection of that parental cry gives me a warm feeling of joyous anticipation. I have a soft spot in my heart for dumb, old, squeaky-voiced Henry Aldrich, for without him to look forward to each Tuesday night, I surely would have died of boredom at age 6 in a remote valley of the Idaho Rockies. The rich people who owned the radio, the Burfords, were a family of woodcutters, a stringy little father, a plump mother, and 4 sons, the size and intelligence of pickup trucks. We would all gather around the radio and listen to the hilarious predicaments Henry was all the time getting himself into, and we would laugh until our sides ached, which was what everybody said every Tuesday evening. I laughed till my sides ached. After the program was over, someone would repeat something Henry had said, and we would all be off again, laughing until our sides ached even more than they had before. "I don't know how one boy can get himself into so much trouble," Mr. Burford would say, wiping his eyes. "A week don't go by but what that Henry pulls some fool stunt." As soon as the Henry Aldrich show was over, Mrs. Burford would clean off the kitchen table, and my mother, Mr. and Mrs. Burford, and the smartest of the Burford boys would play a few rounds of pinochle. The troll and the, it goes without saying, dumbest of the Burford boys would sit in a corner and giggle. I would curl up with the dogs by the stove and try to get a bit of sleep, if for no other reason than to take my mind off the fact that we still had the bridge to cross on our way home. The pinochle game served not only to milk more entertainment out of a Tuesday evening, but had a practical purpose as well. A wolf pack roamed the valley in those days, and the playing of pinochle gave us the opportunity to get a reading on the whereabouts of the wolves. The point of this was to improve the odds that the paths of the wolves and the McManuses would not intersect on our way home. Every so often, Mr. Burford would say to one of the boys, "Cletus, go check on the wolves." Cletus would step outside the cabin and stand there in the frosty air until he heard the wolves. Then he would step back inside and report, "They's moving along the ridge above Wampus Creek, Pa." "Still too close," Mr. Burford would say. "Whose bid is it?" When Cletus finally reported the wolves a sufficient distance away, the McManus family would spring into action. Coats would be thrown on, hasty goodbyes shouted, and we would charge out the door of the Burford cabin and race for home. On the Tuesday night in question, the wolves failed to raise their usual ruckus, possibly because there was no moon and the night was black as pitch. Cletus stood outside until he frosted over without hearing a single wolfish yip. "Can't hear 'em, Pa," he reported. "They could be anywheres." "Maybe you all should spend the night," Mrs. Burford suggested. "Thank you, no," Mom said. "We'll go home." "What?" I said. "We don't know where the wolves are. You gotta be kidding. Wild horses couldn't budge me out that door." 5 minutes later, we were scurrying along the trail toward home, walls of darkness towering above us on both sides. The wolves, gaunt and hungry, their black lips curling over their sharp white fangs, could be lying in wait for us anywhere, watching for any telltale signs of weakness in this panicky herd of hurrying humans. Crouched beside the trail, the leader of the pack points to the small human lagging farther and farther behind the 2 larger ones. "That's the best bet," he says. "Wait for me," I hissed through frozen breath as the long legs of my mother and the troll churned up clouds of powdery snow in the distance. I caught up with them at the bridge, where they stood panting and gathering their wits for crossing this last but major obstacle to safety. I stared glumly at the lacework of logs, whitened by snow and ice, outlining the dark and gaping holes. "Remember," Mom said, her voice shaky with barely restrained terror, "just one step at a time. Keep your balance, and take it nice and slow. I'll go first, and—" At that instant, from the darkness of the trees right above us came the loud hoot of a wolf. "Wolf! Wolf!" I screamed. "They got us!" As a mist of snow settled around my small, defenseless body, I vaguely made out the darting, hurtling, leaping, bounding figures of Mom and the troll midway across the bridge. They sailed over an open expanse of darkness, scarcely touched down on an icy log, then took off again, zagging and zigging in midair, picking out occasional footholds as if by radar, and elbowing each other for position on the turns. The wolf hooted again above me. "Wolves don't hoot," I said to myself, smiling with satisfaction over the proof of another of my hypotheses about human motivation. "Owls hoot." Everybody knew that, but Mom and the troll had momentarily forgotten it when subjected to the proper stimulus. Interesting. I felt a little guilty conducting experiments on live humans, but still, a small boy snowbound in a remote valley of the Rockies had to invent his own entertainment as best he could.